Thank you. Thank you. Welcome all. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is Wednesday, August 28th. This is a regular meeting of the Pear Beach Building Committee. And moving on to our first item on the agenda, it's the approval of the minutes from the July 31st meeting. And I know those have been circulated, so I guess if anybody, Cheryl?
Yes, I have a correction to the minutes.
Great.
I have it printed out. Oh, Tom's not here yet. Is he coming tonight or?
He's supposed to be here, but actually Pam had taken the minutes from the last meeting, so maybe Pam, if you can just, in Tom's absence, kind of help us out with.
Okay, under,
Thank you.
oh, let me go here. The hell did I do with the minutes? Under the minutes of the meeting of July 19th, I have a correction to be made to say under new business, under boat ramp permit process beginning soon.
This is the
This is
31st.
the
I mean, the 31st, I'm
Yes.
sorry, yes, I
Yes.
have it written down, 31st. Under new business, Mrs. Russell requested that a discussion and possible vote regarding the boat ramp be on the next agenda for our meeting August 28th. She felt it was important to start the process for the boat ramp now, as it may take a long time for permits, and would like Mr. Biggs to have all his information at the 28th meeting. I have it written. Just like that in the minutes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, anyone have any other comments? So then I'd ask for a motion then to approve the minutes as amended.
As long as the
Second.
amendment is attached to the minutes.
Approved as amended.
Moved as amended, okay.
Yeah, as amended.
Thank you.
Seconded? Anyone?
Second?
Yep, all those in favor? Great, okay. Thank you very much, Cheryl. So Cheryl, maybe just before we move on, with that one item, are you comfortable, because there was a suggestion of covering that item under new business. Are you comfortable covering that item under new business this evening? Would you like us to put a motion, ask for a motion from the committee to add an item to the agenda for discussion?
When you do an agenda, if you're going to have something, if a committee member asks for something to be on an agenda, it would be appropriate to put it on the agenda. All you have here is new business, so I didn't know whether we were gonna discuss the boat ramp possibilities or not, or if they had the information that I was looking for to move forward on this, or to get some kind of information as to how long it's gonna take for the permit process. Is it a maintenance permit process? Is it a new permit?
No,
Da-da-da-da.
we're discussing it now, so I guess what I'm asking is, are you comfortable discussing it as new business, which I think there was an email that circulated that made that suggestion, or would you like to ask the committee to vote to add an item to the agenda? This is not a special meeting, it's a regular meeting, we have the
No, I'm
prerogative to add
as long
a...
as we will have a discussion on this.
Yes,
Under new business, it's fine.
okay, fair enough. Okay, so with that, thank you. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment, and at this point, I'd like to invite members of the public, if they have anything they'd like to share, please come up, state your name, and
Should I use this podium?
please do.
Please.
Yeah,
My name is Vincent Argambo, and I reside at 69 Salem Straits.
And I'm sorry, you can spell your last name.
I will do that.
ARGUIMBAU. At last week's deliberation over the Pear Tree Beach Building at Parks and Recreation meeting, the committee showed little understanding about what they were undertaking. The committee believes they can retain the existing buildings and scale back to a 500 square foot weed beach type hut at the top. Really a hut elevated 17 feet above shore level with elevator and stairway access. The reality is that the committee is on a path toward a clean sheet proposal which tears down the existing structures to build another $6 million Norotan Yacht Club. It's my contention. Maybe it'll be less, but something in that order. The committee believes the building will be a popular year-round facility, so much so it'll have to be reserved for beach visitors during the summer and then made available for public and private events in the off-season. So let me get this straight. Its indoor, heated, and elevated features will be of little use and interest during the summer, and just when those features would be desirable, the neighborhood will restrict its use. The point is that the committee has not considered that Rowayton restricts We Burn Beach Club, the Tokenique Association restricts the Tokenique Beach Club, Norotan Bay restricts the Norotan Yacht Club from off-season use. I suggest the committee consult with town council about the likelihood of such a restriction coming from Pear Tree Point's neighborhood. I believe the committee will be informed that it's not 100% certain that such a restriction could be avoided despite it being town property.
Excuse me, Vincent, just in the interest of time, and I appreciate the
Yes.
comments, but we do have other members, and we've got a
Yeah.
very, very long agenda, and I probably should have, I'm remiss in not having at least limited public comment to typically 2 minutes if we've got a long agenda, so
Very good, I'm wrapping it up.
just a reminder, thanks.
I believe the committee should stick to the idea of improving the Pear Tree Beach experience by refurbishing the 2 buildings within the constraints of FEMA. And if they want to construct something, it should be resilient, such an open deck on the south side of the commissary building, one with temporary tents for summer use. That's it.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I think so. I mean, once again, we've got a very long agenda this evening, so. Also, just a reminder, we do have, we'll be referring to some documents that have been made available to the committee as we've been learning some new things. We have copies of those documents here for distribution if, for anybody who would like to grab one. Those documents are also posted, or will certainly be posted on the town's website, as will all the materials that we're distributing and referring to. Anyone else like to make any comment?
Good evening, how are you? My name is Brooks Rusha, spelled H-R-U-S-A. Live at 62 Sedgwick Avenue in Darien, Connecticut. My concerns are concerns that my fiance and a lot of other people have in the town about blocking the view of the beach from the parking lot. And being that it's a small town with open door policies and people we know on the boards, we were hoping that our voices would be heard. Unfortunately, it seems at times with the committee that there are people that kind of, well, should I say, force feed what they feel is the best for the people instead of listening to what the people have said. And there are statements made by individuals that, you know, we need to vote on this now because we're not going to get a second chance to do it and things like that. Over the past few weeks, we've been down the beach and we've had a petition, and people don't really understand the whole thing with the dunes and the berms and the purposes of it. And as I see, reading, there's a gentleman, Dan Briggs. I haven't met him. I don't know who he is. Nice to meet you. But he has suggested the dunes be installed. And he refers to the National Resource Conservation Service studies And I looked at all those studies, and I couldn't find anything that, other than things that he stated that were based on what's called the coastline, Atlantic Coast Shoreline Study, but that doesn't cover the Connecticut coastline, because Connecticut coastline, Long Island Sound's an estuary. It's not direct ocean front. So, being the second largest estuary in the country, with Long Island blocking it, most of the storm wind goes up and down the sound as opposed to pounding the surf. And he makes a statement in it with the coming trends of what's happening with the rising tides and all that. I understand that, but when I look around at the other beaches in Fairfield County, and I don't see anybody putting in dunes and berms like what they did at Weed. And Weed Beach is obviously a much different sea level than what's going on at Pear Tree. I mean, Pear Tree's pretty much right at sea level. That's why the parking lot fills up with water. But closing with that, it's just, as the statements have been made by people here before, and I actually think Ms. Geary made a statement that the committee understands that people want to drive in to see the water. And that's a no-brainer. And with that being said, the recommendation of minimum 3-foot-high berms is going to block everything. And so I think there's a lot of people here that feel the same way, and there's a lot of people that signed up. And I think the feeling is, please, don't block our beach.
Thank you. Appreciate it, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ruth Ann Ramsey. I'm on the Board of Appeals, but I'm here as a private citizen tonight. And I'm also a real estate agent. So we drive people by the beaches all the time.
Dan, can I get your address?
32 Gideon Lane.
Thank you.
And I actually won a contest, and my slogan for the town was "Beauty and the Beach." Interesting. So anyway, I still have to spend the money that they gave me. What I think, we automatically drive people by the beaches because it's such an attractive thing for people moving into the area. And I don't know what we would have to do. Actually, today, I drove down to Cummings Beach in Stamford, and they don't have any berms. So I sat there, I actually ate my lunch looking at their water, and I would like to continue doing that at our beaches. And then, I go often. I don't know how many of you go often, but I go often. And I notice many people sitting there eating their lunch, just sitting in their car. They don't even get out sometimes. And sometimes I get out, go sit on the park bench, sometimes I sit in my car. It matters what the day, even on a rainy day. So, and I'd like to say also, since I was on the original Commission for the Aging, there's many people in this town that have no access to the water in any way. They're also infirm and unable to get out and make that transition onto sand for sure, but they like seeing the water. And then, what else? It's relaxing, and it's just sort of like a Darien view. It's historical, actually. I mean, I came, since the 1950s, I've been going to that beach and sitting in my car, looking out at the water and enjoying, and I used to go to Weed Beach, but I don't anymore. So that's everything I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment?
I'll just talk briefly. I don't know if you can written, but I spend,
Can you just-
Bridget Whitney, 31 Beach Drive. I spend a lot of time at that little beach. And, you know, every year, it's a sanctuary for the same group of people. We all come back every year. We go away for the winter, we come back, we're all there again. It's a tiny little beach. You know, I don't know the details of the whole plan, but I hear they're gonna get rid of that side beach where the little kids can go in and it's kind of their wading pool. I was there 2 days ago and there was a party at the end and kids scream. And they scream their heads off. And that's a little beach for lots of kids to be running around screaming their heads off. It's nice on the weekends that we have that division and they have their place. And it's really a special little place. And I just don't know, you know, I live closer to Weed. I was at Weed last night. But, you know, if people want that kind of beach, great, they've got it. The town has provided that for them. I mean, I think Kelly has in excess of 300 signatures, and I think there was another list, 200 signatures of people who really cherish it just the way it is. Yes, it needs a few, you know, modifications and some updating, but it's a really special place. And turning it into another playground and just, you know, I don't know how many of you really spend time down there, but it's a small space. And putting in these big buildings and talking about a pier and doing away with the side beach, really, I would encourage you to spend as much time as we do on that little beach. It really doesn't need much. The simplicity of it is what makes it so beautiful, and the people. So that's just my point.
Further comment?
Don't go a meeting without saying something. Janine Hackett, 112 Pear Tree Point Road. I was going to say exactly what you said, that, you know, you say you want to hear the public input, you say you're listening to us, you say you're interested in what we say, but you haven't heard us. And we're here every month, and we keep telling you we don't want this, and that this is not Wheat Beach. We treasure our little beach the way it is. We don't want massive structures, we don't want berms, we don't want this stuff. We like our beach the way it is. And it's a completely different environment and space than Wheat Beach. And I feel like this committee is trying to turn it into another Wheat Beach. And your comments of if we build it, they will come. We know we've only heard negative, but there's got to be other people out there who want it. We just haven't heard from them. You haven't heard from them because they're not there. These are the people that use the beach, and the people that use the beach want the beach the way it is. We don't want you to change it into something else. And I'm not going to say everything else she said, but I 1,000% agree with her. And one other thing I just find frustrating is that we're never allowed to ask questions. Public comment has been moved since early on to the beginning of the meeting, where it takes a month before we get to come back and comment on what you all said. And it's like we sit through the whole thing like this, wanting to say something, yet we can't comment. And I wish you'd move public comment to the end when we can comment on what you've discussed. Thank you.
My name is Joe Lombardo, and I live on 6 Gideon Lane in town. I just have a question now. It seems as though there's maybe a problem with erosion or other problem where we're trying to protect the beach, and that might be the reason for the berms. And my question is, has an environmental study been done at that beach to prove that this is the only solution, or do we have other solutions that we could check into rather than put a berms up, which it's a sweet little small town beach and everyone loves it, so it's too bad to just change the whole. I mean, understand it needs remodeling, it needs renewing, but there's a lot of things it does not need. Thank you. Joe, J-O.
And the last one.
Lombardo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Delise Bolleton, 150 Pear Tree Point Road. I just wanted to add to really what Janine was saying. You know, it is a very special beach and it's very quiet and serene. I accept that during the summer, on the weekends, there's a fair amount of noise that, you know, emanates from the beach, but it is incredible how the sound carries because there is nothing to block it. There's no trees or anything to absorb that sound. And I live right across the street. I love the sound of the activities in the summer and the kids and people having a good time, but I would not be at all happy with an event space where there are parties and people and things going on during the week, into the evening. I don't need that in my residence where I want quiet and peace. It's just an inappropriate location for that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anita Conway. My family and myself have been a resident of Darien for over 50 years, and I want to 25 Harriet Lane. I want to start off by really thanking the town for the joy that these beaches have given my family. My brother was a lifeguard at Pear Tree Point during the 1960s. My mom, up until 91, enjoyed those beaches. And it breaks my heart to see something beautiful be taken away. And I think that what I have observed, and I am a designer, a commercial designer by trade, and I find that what is lacking here is a lack of stewardship on the part of the town. And I think this was quite evident at Weed Beach. I think that the primary concerns of the beach as a function for beach goers was not addressed. The secondary functions were addressed. And I think that there is a wielding of true pressure from special interest groups, whether they wanted a playground, whether they want a hut for their paddle courts. But the people that are using the beach, that go there every day, are not being addressed. And I think there's a tremendous fear that this will happen to Pear Tree Point. It cannot sustain an activity destination center. It is small. And what the beaches need is the support that goes with the beach. You need facilities, you need a place to change, you need bathrooms, you need good sand, you need access to the water, and that is basically all you need. You need lifeguards. And that is it. It is a beach. And I am asking that you keep the beach, you keep its charm, and you keep its history.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Public comment?
Just one duly noted point for you people, and kudos to all of you, is that the August 2nd Long Island Sound Save the Sound ranked the top 10 beaches in the Connecticut shoreline, and Pear Tree Point Beach was ranked number 10 for its water quality and its beach safety. And that's a huge feather in your guys' cap, especially the Park and Rec and Jimmy Flynn, the way those people take care of that beach. And that statement right there just tells you that we really don't need to fix the little New England beach.
Okay. So we've taken a bit of a hiatus. We had been meeting on a 2-week cadence, and we set aside our mid-August meeting for a couple of different reasons. Folks were not available, folks were off. So we've had a month, and during that period, had some brief conversations with Neil and team and with Dan, and I know they've been working very hard to kind of factor in feedback and kind of progress their thinking around both the environmental aspects of what we're doing and the structural aspects as well. So I think with that, maybe the best thing to do at this stage, because I know you've got a lot of material to cover, is we'll turn it over to you. I would encourage us to kind of raise questions as we go along here. And so, fellas, go ahead.
Could this be just tilted just a little bit this way so people can see? Just kind of.
About the people over here.
Yeah, it is also very important that the members, on the committee get a good view of it as well. So it's, the room is not perfectly set up. We apologize for AV, but we'll do the best we can. But I could slide over a seat too if you guys want to do a shift right here.
Probably better for me, yes.
Yeah. Or if Tom, do you want to just kind of wrap around over here?
Oh, no. Go next to Kim. Pam.
Are you going this way or are you
I'm going down.
Okay. So what, Adele, how are you over there?
So I think you all have handouts, and everything you see should be on the screen, right? Yep. It's a little different. Since our last meeting, we've revised our concepts, and we think we have some options to consider. The priorities and key considerations are really the same that have been discussed previously, but just to recite those that have been discussed previously, our priorities really are to protect the views, provide accessibility within the park areas. These may consist of sidewalks or pedestrian access ways from the parking areas to the amenities on the site. Reduce sand washing onto the parking lot and the roadways. Maintain natural qualities of the beach and park, and repair, reconstruct the boat launch. So as we're thinking of those priorities that have been set out in the beginning of the project, we have a lot of considerations that we're balancing as we're looking at each of these priorities. So we're balancing between the views and the buffers. You'll hear some discussion about the sand dunes component of this. Balancing the maintained accessibility within the park area. Looking at storm resiliency of this beach area. Looking at boat trail maneuverability, as well as preserving parking within the beach area, and then progressing through the permitting process for each of these components of the site. So I want to start off just looking at the overall site plan that we're working through now, and see each of the letters. We'll touch upon each of the letters as we move forward, kind of going in a clockwise fashion. The first area we're going to be talking about is right here, just due west of the existing bathhouse that's there. There is a tidal wetland in this area, and the project is looking to enhance this wetland feature. Once we have a delineation, we'll be able to plan and design how to restore this wetland area for sustainability. It did get washed out during Hurricane Sandy, compromised a little bit. I shouldn't say washed out, but compromised. So looking to restore that wetland area with new vegetation and to remove some sediment that has been built up over time. The next area that obviously many are here to discuss tonight or to hear about is its sand dunes. And up to this point, we have proposed a couple of different options, and we've gone back and forth to look at what could we consider within these sand dune areas. A couple of things I want to point out along this, on the site plan, while looking at the sand dunes. If you see a line that's right here, moves up and around, that dashed line, that's actually the existing edge of parking line within the Pear Tree Point parking area. The plan you see before you is looking at providing dunes with vegetation while reducing some of the parking areas along this on the west side as well as along the south side. Now, there has been conversation just about what would this look like. So we thought it'd be worthwhile to, as we showed last meeting, to show what would it look like from your car, from the parking area, and that perspective looking out towards the west. So taking the elevation of a person in the car in the driving seat, looking straight out across. The current perspective looking down the beach would be this view shed here. Now, not really telling you a whole lot since the section, so we thought we'd render this to show what this graphic might look like if you're in the parking lot. So the graphic on the left-hand side is a rendering that would show what it looks like today. Nose in parking. This is primarily along the west-hand side. You can see example of a bathhouse structure on the left, and a proposed dune construction that would be at the nose of the stalls. Another perspective, if you're pulling into that stall, nose in towards the beach area here in front of you, and the example would look like if there's a dune in front of you. So the dunes aren't excessively high. They are about 3 feet tall, 10 feet at the base, and 2 or 3 feet at the top. Now, thinking through this concept, there's many benefits to having dunes, but we're going to show you some ideas as to how this could be implemented over time. But a couple of the details we showed last time about what a dune consists of. So besides the sand, a dune would have an edge that would be vegetated and coir logs at the base that would provide it for structural support during a storm event. A couple of the options from a vegetation standpoint, the most common vegetation is American beach grass. As you see here in this graphic, this is the common vegetation on most dunes along the coastline. But other options include spike grass here, which is a little shorter, or even lower could be sea rocket, or even shorter could be sandwort. So these range from 6 inches tall to 36 inches tall. Obviously, having a diversity of plantings within the dune area is better from an ecological standpoint, adds diversity to the dunes. But obviously, we're balancing that view versus the functional components of the dune feature itself. So while we were thinking through these dune components, we wanted to bring up a couple of the commonly asked questions, some of the reasons or the discussion points that we consider when looking at dunes in this area. The question's been, has the beach been losing land over the years? The answer is yes, actually. And someone would say, well, what's your evidence? According to the Climate Central, which is the online research consortium of NOAA data, there's been losing about 5 inches of land in the last 3 or 4 years. Now, you may not think that that is significant. 5 inches is probably less than the length between each of my fingers. But in time, that would add up. 3 or 4 years. So just for perspective, the highest observed flood in the area was in 2012 of about 5.7 with a base datum about 2.0 feet elevation. So what does this mean? So in 34 years, it's about 5 inches. So in 2020, which is at the bottom of this graph provided by NOAA, it's projected at 1.1 feet of sea level rise. So that means that next year, the year after, that elevation will go from 2.0 to 3.2, and eventually, getting further out as you project, could be up to 18.5 feet. There's no proof that this can happen, that this timeline is actually going to happen, but sea level rise is here, it's happening now.
Could I just interrupt? I have a question, I don't want to forget it. So the sea level rises, but that doesn't mean we're losing beach.
So you're going on to some of the questions about the answer here.
Okay,
so
sorry.
Why does this matter is the next question.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So if sea level rises, what this does is it raises that base elevation for all the storm surges and high tides. So if you have water starting at this elevation, right?
Yep.
And event happens and it rises for surge or high tide rises. If you're now starting at this elevation, just for perspective, and you're now going up higher, everything is going to be that much higher of a washing into the parking area or into the beach area. So your base starting point is that much higher. Does that make sense to everyone? Right? So if you have a point where you're starting right now,
Okay.
and you have a storm surge or high tide, say it goes 3 feet elevation. It's to this point. If you're now moving that whole cycle up higher, that is that much higher in the volume of flow that flows into the beach area. So your starting point is higher than it is right now.
And I think in terms of beach loss, it's because the elevation of the water is higher that you have less of an expanse of beach that you're able to walk out. And then on top of that, the waves are stronger and it's carrying more of the beach away during high flood events, high storm events.
So Martha, if this is the current
Right.
beach, and let's say that's where the water level is now,
Right.
on average, as that rises up,
Mhm.
it takes away this much beach,
Usable beach. yeah.
usable
Mhm.
beach,
Sure.
yeah.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you're
Sure.
losing sand. I mean, it's,
Oh, no,
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 not losing sand.
not sand.
but I mean.
Beach to
but with the
occupy.
elevation, but now how is a dune
Sure.
going to give you
Sure.
more beach?
Sure. So what?
Question.
So what are the benefits of dunes?
Okay.
All right.
Would you guys embrace this?
Yeah, sure.
I just
So,
want to understand this because it's
Right.
very important.
yeah, it is very important. And it's really wonderful to be here, and it's great to be able to hear everybody's feedback, and I truly understand that the idea of blocking the views and the whole
Rochelle,
concept
I
of.
apologize for interrupting.
Sure.
Maybe you could just, because you have, I think maybe you've had one visit with us.
Yes.
It's a way back.
Okay,
You want
sure.
to just kind of maybe explain a little bit about your credentials?
Yes,
You're with
sure.
Weston and Sampson, and maybe just a bit about,
Yeah.
for the committee's benefit.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. So my name is Rochelle McKnight. I work with Weston and Sampson. I'm a landscape architect and arborist. And my role at Weston and Sampson, and before I actually came to Weston and Sampson, primarily has been in ecological restoration, habitat restoration, and a lot of the projects that I work on specifically for the company have to do with shoreline restoration, and buffering against sea level rise and working for climate resiliency in a variety of municipalities under a total array of circumstances. So, for example, we've been working extensively with the city of Boston on the Charles River to help them understand why the shoreline of the Charles River is eroding and what they can do to better buffer that. We work in Kingston, New York. There's a number of different places where we're doing very similar projects. And so I'm here because this is kind of what I think about most of the time. So sand dunes, what I really want to make clear is that the purpose for us to come in and recommend sand dunes is not because we as landscape architects think that they would look pretty and, okay, caveat, I do think they would look pretty. But that is not why we are recommending them at all. The reason we are recommending the sand dunes is to protect the infrastructure that you have on site right now. And what that means basically is your parking lot and anything that's behind that. So the purpose of installing these dunes is to, when you do have a flood event, the water is going to come in, and yes, there will be inlets where people can walk back and forth between the dunes and the beach, but having some sort of gradual rise of sand, an elevated surface, plus vegetation, helps to reduce the velocity of waves that come into your site, right? Especially having that vegetation produces what's called a hydraulic roughness. And so the water kind of gets trapped in that vegetation, and it reduces its ability to overtop and come into the parking lot and to potentially flood behind that. So that is really the reason that we are proposing sand dunes, and definitely the reason that we've proposed restoring these tidal wetlands. It's not just for habitat quality, it's not just because it would make things, better for birds and insects, which it would, but it's because we are actually trying to protect what it is that you already have on site. Okay? Does that sound fair to
So
everybody?
this prompts a question more for the committee. The bigger question is the value of the resource, which is the parking area, is it of value enough to have a measure of a sand dune to protect that resource? That's the biggest question here. So they do provide an energy absorption area. They will minimize the amount of sand that goes into the parking lot. The park staff has already maintained the parking lot if there is a surge of sand coming to the parking area. It's going to increase by looking at some of the numbers we just showed you of if that elevation increases of sea rise, you're gonna have more sand coming to the parking lot, more frequent. So if that is simply okay, because that's just how it operates, how it functions, then less of a need to have the dunes. Going back to the graphic that I showed of the area, so if this is the edge of current asphalt here and here, there is a possibility that, we're projecting out what sea rise will be in a number of years. That could be that the dunes are constructed now, and that area is given back as beach. And in time, it's a phased approach that if the storms keep coming and maintenance staff says it's an issue, that then the dunes could be installed if that's the need that arises. Because as we've heard and seen, it's not here now. We're projecting that's going to be there, that in terms of an issue. But it could be considered that the dunes are constructed, the land is given to a wider beach area here, and in the event that the need for the dunes, you have the land available to construct them at that time.
Dan, would the dunes protect the road, Pear Tree Point Road, from more flooding, or yes, no, maybe so?
It's not really, because the dunes are going to have places for access into the beach. So I'd be lying to say that the water would never get into the parking lot. It's going to come in the parking lot with some sand. Now, the grades are that comes down a lower area into the road. So could water get into the road? Yeah. Again, the storm drains are along the parking area. There's a little bird bath area, and then there's also storm drains along the road. So it's not going to stop water from getting that far. A high enough storm could cover the whole parking lot at some point. Yeah.
We've seen that before.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to remind, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sure.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Dan, in looking at this, that design up there, you remove the parking along the beach area where people back in and go in face first, correct?
You're referring to this location.
Area right there.
Correct.
With doing that, did you expand the beach area into that parking area? Or is that the exact beach area we have today?
No. So the dashed line is currently where the curb is between parking lot and beach. So as you see here.
Okay, so you've moved it back.
Yep. So what is not the black would be a sand surface instead of asphalt.
Okay. So you've moved it back, but we don't know how many feet you've moved it
20
back.
feet. 18 feet to be exact.
Okay.
It's the length of a stall.
Okay.
Length of one parking stall.
Let me write this in here, okay.
Yeah.
18 to 20 feet into parking area, correct?
How many parking spaces should that eliminate?
I want to say.
Excuse me, can I just ask, please? We've got work to do here, and I just asked if you guys could just keep it down so we can figure out what's going on
Okay,
here.
let me go with my train of thought here before I lose it again. Okay, so you moved it in 18 to 20 feet into the parking lot. That's feet. Okay, let me just put feet in here. Now, having said that, everybody, as you can see, is very concerned about berms. Front beach, West Beach and South Beach. What if, because these berms are basically 3 feet high, and then you have in the other, on this graph, 3 feet, up to 3 feet high grasses on the top and sides.
Yeah.
So that's 6 feet.
Sure.
Okay? So that is, it to me, I'm 5'7", and I've been standing in front of a lot of people's cars lately in both beaches, because I'm there at Pear Tree on a daily basis. So I'm asking people, can you see past me? And they say no. So I'm wondering, instead of a 3-foot berm, okay, is it possible, because I understand the flooding situation and keeping the water and the sand on the beach, that's okay. But what if we take the berm and instead of a 3-foot berm, make like a 2-foot or a 1-foot sand, raise the sand up a little bit, and then put low plantings there?
So like
Will
the
the
options
plantings,
down here.
right,
Yeah.
will the plantings, those lower plantings, be as effective? Because you're still gonna have a 20 to 25-foot space between the berms.
Sure.
And my thinking is if the tide comes in, it's gonna come through those berms, and it's gonna wash the sand into the parking lot. Anyway,
Sure.
so I'm thinking if you've got a 3-foot berm there, you're gonna have more sand coming into the parking lot. If you have a less amount of sand, then less amount will come into the parking lot. I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'm just common sense here is saying to me, we have an awful lot of concern about these berms.
Can I try a different angle on what you're?
Well,
yes?
I want to know my angle first. I know it's
I don't think it's not-
convoluted,
well, let me
but
rephrase
if with
it.
the low plants,
Cheryl?
well, no, it's the way I'm thinking. If the lower plants would actually help and alleviate the way people can see from their cars.
It would,
The
if
higher plants.
the lower vegetation would help to retain a view because it would not obstruct as much of the view.
Right.
Correct.
What if you had no berm, but you just planted the beach grass? So that at that point, cars that are parked in the front row can still see the water. Will the grasses act to stabilize the
They will.
beach?
Yes.
Not to the extent that the dunes would, but they certainly would help.
They would help.
And they would capture some of the sand that would be potentially washing in.
Yeah, that's what I was
One
saying.
thing I wanted to mention about the concern that with dunes, you're gonna have more sand coming onto the beach. The dunes would be constructed so that they are vegetated. The vegetation will hold the sand in place. So it's not like you have right now with the open beach where there's just sand. The dunes are gonna be stabilized by that vegetation. So you're not receiving more sand from the dunes themselves. You would definitely still get the water coming in on those inlets. It's just gonna be less. Instead of it being a giant washover of sand, you have isolated areas where you're getting more of the influx.
Oh, it's not that much sand. I'm sorry.
Yes.
But to your comment, your comment, if it's not much sand, that is where I'm suggesting that if dunes may not be the need right now, that make the space and they could build in the future when it is more of an issue for maintenance by park staff.
And perhaps you're then witnessing over time, what is the sea level rise really looking like? Because we have projections right now and they're looking pretty accurate, but then in 10 years, you can come back to the table, or 5 years, and say, we know now that we have
It's
even
more
more than we
frequent,
had.
it's
And the
more
storms are getting
intensity.
worse, and we do need this,
So
whereas now.
let me try my different angle now.
Sure.
And the different angle here is maybe just to clarify. So the reason we're even having this conversation about berms is because a concern was raised at the time the Parks and Rec's master plan was written about the inconvenience associated with sand washing up on the beach during full moon, high tide. So, and I stressed the word inconvenience. We know it takes some time for Pam staff to go out and clean that off X number of times. And Pam, at some point, maybe you can help us understand how many times that might be a year. But it does seem to me, and based upon all the feedback we're getting, that kind of going down a road of discussing berms, which are fairly conventional and are used in many, many different situations, it's probably like in kind of maybe an excessive solution for the problem we're trying to solve for. So back to Cheryl's point, and it seemed to me what I just heard you guys kind of offering up to the committee for consideration is to not implement berms, take a little bit of a different course that would allow us over time, allow the town over time to evaluate what's happening with that beach. And I think there's kind of the intersection from my perspective, from what I'm hearing, of 2 points. One was kind of, we got into this conversation because of maybe this inconvenience to Pam's staff, which we need to be mindful of. But I think we've learned something also along the way, which is, to your point, there is the possibility as a result of sea level rise and other aspects of what we're talking about here that we do need to be more mindful about the resiliency and the protection of that beach. So I think what I heard you saying is, as another option potentially, with a focus not on whether it's convenient or inconvenient for Parks and Rec staff, but more with a focus on resiliency and protecting the beach, that if we were to actually expand the size of the beach a bit, and I don't know how many towns on the planet get an opportunity to even contemplate building more beach, so I think it's an interesting opportunity for us as a committee here and for the town. If by doing that and planting that with some vegetation that further knits kind of that, let's call it an apron, an expanded apron, that maybe we're satisfying or at least kind of potentially solving for the resiliency issue, whether or not that deals with how much sand is washing up on the beach. Quite honestly, from my perspective, I don't really think that's all that, I mean, it's just one person's opinion, but I mean, I think resiliency and protection of the beach, I think is the kind of the centerpiece of the conversation for us. So anyway, I'm raising that just because I'm trying to make sure that I heard what you were offering up
You're
a few
correct.
moments ago.
Yes. So if you vegetate in the area that's between the new edge of parking and the beach area, if you vegetate that as a buffer.
Between the existing beach area.
Yes, between existing beach would be on this side of this dashed line here, if I can go straight line. In this area, which is showing as berms, if those berms weren't there and that's now expanded beach area and that was planted, it would provide a buffer to the parking area. And that could be a mixture of plantings, low or up to 36 inches tall. So
I mean, we know that West Beach is fairly shallow
it's
or
tight.
narrow.
There's a pinch
at,
point
you
right
know.
here. Yeah.
We also know one other aspect about that West Beach. There is no shade on that side of the beach. So maybe by kind of extending and creating an additional apron, that creates an opportunity to put maybe some additional shade trees, as
Correct.
an example, along that
Yep.
along that side of the beach as well.
And the same thing applied to South Beach here, where you see the dash line here is existing edge of asphalt. We've gained there about 5 feet or so. So if that was just expanded beach area, it could be planted as well. And that provides more shade with the trees that are there retained or adding additional trees. And in time, Pam will see how frequent she's out there needing to maintain the sand removal, and that becomes a greater issue. Then that's when you address providing another.
Well, then we're weighing inconveniences, and I think what we're hearing is, we're weighing the inconvenience for the town staff against the inconvenience for the community, members of the community who value the ability to kind of experience the beach in the way that they're experiencing it. So
that's true, but you don't want to forget, it does get dirty every time you scrape it up off of the asphalt. You add a bit of asphalt to the beach. Anyway, not to lose sight of that.
True.
Well, it's a good point, but I think then maybe, but I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is maybe with that additional apron now, I mean, that sand is now being placed in a place that it wouldn't otherwise exist today, and not impacting, I mean, if you've got another, what's the depth of these parking spots that we're talking about?
So typical stall is 9 by 18, so 18 feet long.
So you've got another 18-foot spot where you can put that stand as opposed to, where people are currently sitting, I guess, maybe.
Dan, if you did the vegetation, would you use that whole 18 feet you've taken, or maybe just 10 feet, or?
To vegetate it?
To vegetate.
I'll have to look and get into design further. There's places where we could make it not the whole length, but obviously where it pinches, there's a pinch point right around in this area. We would opt not to. We try and keep maintain as much beach width as possible. So yeah, we aren't there yet, but we will get there.
And would you consider putting something underneath it, like those, I don't know what you call them, the pipes that are filled with
like
dirt?
core log?
Yeah, core logs to.
Yeah, so that.
Even if they're just right down, even subsurface for the vegetation to grab onto.
Those are degradable logs that actually give initial establishment of structural support. So we'd have to see what the grades look like there. It may not be appropriate, but you may have it during construction for erosion sediment control. But we'll get into those details further as appropriate to the design.
Dan, what did you say the front, the South Beach is, how much did you move that parking lot back? 5 feet?
I believe I think I said 5 feet, but
5 feet.
I'm looking at the line, and it may actually be the width of one stall, which would be 9 total.
5 to 9.
Yeah.
Okay. In a previous plans that we've had, you had sidewalks at both beaches. You don't have them on this plan, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what if, instead of the dunes, and we put the lower grasses in, what if we put a sidewalk in there, even if it was like a 3-foot wide sidewalk? I don't know what the minimum standard is, but if you put a 3-foot sidewalk in there, could you raise the sidewalk up 2 inches or 3 inches to give that a little bit more buffer too with the grasses?
So,
I mean, a 6-inch sidewalk isn't that, is not that difficult for people to get up and over.
yeah. So we can add a sidewalk on either legs of the beach. Typically, we would follow a conventional 6-inch high curb height, unless we were to go to a non-conventional curb, which could be a 4-inch. They exist.
Okay.
Would your benefit be there to having a 4-inch curb to give a little additional lip on the beach side? We have to look at it closer. And you could do it.
I did like the sidewalk on both beaches because I felt that it gave a little buffer, you know, between the cars right up against the beach. When I sit there and somebody pulls in, we're always holding our breath. But I think that gives you that little bit of area to walk with the kids. This, you know, now you've got the children crossing the parking lot to get into the beach, so that's a different story. Let's keep talking about the berms. I like the trees on the back beach. I think gives shade. People are interested in shade. I like that fact that you have those all along the back, the west beach and the south beach, adding more trees to that area too. Because people sit all around the trees.
Deep, how do they feel about physically expanding a beach? Is that an issue? You have to get permitting for that?
No, there's no issue. So it was brought up earlier about the permitting process. So we have submitted for pre-application, waiting to hear back on when our meeting would be with DEEP. And we're putting forward everything possible that could be part of this project. And then if some things don't pan out, then they just aren't further permitted. But we're going worst case scenario for a conversation with them. Everything from the boat ramp to improvements along the beach or beach nourishment. But expanding the beach is rarely ever a concern.
Okay, that's a question. And now maintenance of berms or even just grasses now, you know, there are a lot of issues sometimes once things get growing and weeds get in there and other species. Can you weed them out, or once they're growing in a protected area, a dune, must they be left?
It's species contingent on how they'd react to a different removal process. So you can pull some weeds and they won't come back. You can pull some weeds and then you've just encouraged it to spread further elsewhere, as in most of our gardens and planting beds. So
in other words, there are no regulations that preclude you from making
removals.
It wouldn't be a protected area.
If,
It's not like it's
Yeah.
a wetland or something where you'd have to protect.
no, I don't know. You know,
It's
just
not.
asking
Yeah,
a
there would be
question.
no restrictions upon reading
Okay.
of a dune.
Yeah, all right. We can- yeah.
The area on the back side, like right here, what is that?
That edge there,
Yeah, the
That's-
filled in block?
that edge is currently shown as it is today. And I'm gonna further progress along to the boat ramp reconstruction. We have not proposed any changes to this edge right now.
So
It's just the striped, no parking. So the person on the end can
It's not the way it is today.
Oh, you're talking about right here, that spot?
This spot right here, these two spots right here, have you reduced the number of parking spaces in these areas?
We have not reduced them. We have reconfigured the parking spacing to meet the current town regulations, which has left a different quantity of stalls in each row and aisle. But these markouts here are for a user that's in the last stall. If they pull in, they have a ability to do a 3-point turn to get out of that aisle.
Thank you.
May I just make one more point about berms, and then we can move on? So I just want to say to a comment I heard earlier, which asked if we had looked at any other alternatives. And we most certainly have. We looked at some permeable paving options. We looked at more depressed bioretention areas. The issue that we are up against is that there's a lot of sand, and so conventional stormwater methods are difficult to implement because the sand gets in and blinds all of the filtration structures. So I just want everybody to know that we have explored other options, and then there was also the idea of constructing a wall that is extremely difficult to permit. And not to mention, I think someone also was saying that they had a hard time finding studies that were particular for the Long Island Sound in Connecticut. And I came across a study today that talked about Hurricane Irene and some of the impacts. And they did find, by and large, that living shoreline structures, such as constructed wetlands or berm systems, had 16% less flood damage in terms of overall dollars than the engineered structures, simply because the natural systems did a better job of mitigating some of the velocity that was coming in to those beach areas. So just something to think about. But I just want to assure everybody that we were not.
That report with this
Absolutely, sure, yeah.
The second question I would ask is, where have you done this before? And from a time frame, have you done this type of reconstruction of the beach? And you did it 5 years ago? And looking at today, is there anything that we can look at?
So
To give us a historical preference? Or
we can certainly find some previous studies for you that have been constructed. Our projects right now are ongoing. This whole climate resilience thing is really taking off, and most of the projects that we have are 1 to 2 years old. Nothing has been constructed. Everything is in the permitting phase at the moment. But there are certainly lots of examples out there. We just, as a firm, don't have it right now.
We did some dune creation at Byron Park, which is now 2 years old, 2 seasons old, handling well, down Branch. So that's a success story. It's not.
What are those berms? Are those near the concession?
No, it's if you pull in the parking, there's it's kind of an odd-shaped parking lot, but there's a wall that is nose into the Sound, and then it's a little beach area before you get to the main entrance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a smaller area. It's not as expansive as this, but it's there right on the Sound. Yeah, and that was restored 2 seasons ago.
And Weed Beach.
What's that?
You have berms at Weed Beach.
Weed Beach was done now 10
or 12
years ago. Yeah, and that handled the last storm
But that was Neil.
very well.
No, but those are berms.
Right.
Yeah, I think that Tom is asking kind of just for evidence of how that would affect the condition.
I mean, even to that point, if you think about weed, just the last storm that happened last fall at Weed Beach, the current dunes handled that storm very well because we were there the next day for another meeting. Down by where the boats are stored for junior sailing, that did not have any berms, any dunes, and that see significant washover and erosion into that drive aisle down to the boat storage area.
Mm-hmm.
Significant compared to the rest of the parking area. So that's just in your own park area that how that scenario happened, 2 different conditions. One is with the dunes, one without. So
Did Weed Beach have a flooding issue previously where the dunes are now?
I can't speak to that 12 years ago.
I probably sound like a broken record, but I did some reading on dunes, and this is out of my area. But what I read is every beach in Connecticut is different. Some, you would say, dunes will protect, and it's mostly to protect upland property. Some, they say, putting in dunes may result in further erosion of the beach. I mean, I think there's some, we really need to have a real study done to show well, I guess, I don't know, we're maybe talking about grass at this point.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I would just remind us that the reason we're having this conversation goes back, as I said, to the issue of sand washing off of Pam's guys. Otherwise, I'm not sure we'd be having the conversation, so.
Well, I think at one of our meetings, we had discussed this, and I think the amount of times would be between 4 and 5 times a year. Correct, Pam? I think you came up with that.
That was, the police department talked about,
In the street.
yes, the street flooding, but not, I'll get the right information from Jen, but it happens enough that, they don't even talk about it anymore. They just scoop it up and put it back in the beach. So it's not a normal conversation we have, and he doesn't report back to me about that, because it's a normal.
It's a frequent maintenance
So it
activity
is,
now.
It's frequent.
But I think and then maybe we can ask these guys if everybody's okay to move on, but I think maybe just to recap, I think what's been proposed here differently than what we've heard in prior conversations is the notion of maybe potentially staging and phasing. So taking maybe some initial steps, adding to resiliency, and then monitoring and evaluating over time and making a determination as to whether or not further steps need to be taken, and maybe they would not need to be taken.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for expanding the beach.
But just one second, on the expansion of the beach, so you still have that pinch point up by the
right by.
second,
Right about here.
right in there.
Yep.
It's so narrow going up towards the boat club that I can see why you didn't expand it up in that neck of the woods, but if it was anywhere, we could expand it further.
Only way to expand beyond this point north is you're removing additional parking stalls.
But you have other considerations there because of the access for the fire trucks, because the fuel tank for the boat club is down there.
So if this line here encroaches east, you lose this row of stalls. And the first amount would be 9 feet, which is one width of a stall.
And how many parking spaces with this plan, as it is today, how many parking spaces are there?
I'm gonna get to the parking here in a couple slides.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Please move on.
We discussed the boat launch previously, so we're planning on removing, replacing, or reconstructing the launch to the proper slope. We haven't progressed any design on this, but this is one of the components of that is part of the project to be reconstructed. We looked at the parking area.
Back out on the boat ramps. From a process standpoint, we've got to, ask everybody and his brothers for approval to play with the boat ramp and whatever. Does it make sense at some particular point sooner than later that we start the DEP
Yep. So
process and for the dredging permits that we're going to need to do?
So in our deep pre-application submission, we basically put it all out there of every possible improvement that could happen in this beach area. And we're going to hear back from them on a meeting time to discuss the project. And we put dredging in there as a possibility. Their first conversation with DEEP is that this is a maintenance activity and they have a pretty short approval process for that, as in 30 to 45 days, if necessary. Being that the boat ramp is a reconstruction, it's not a new ramp, that also may be a fairly streamlined permitting process. Months, we're not talking years here. So, but we put all these improvements in there into the application for them to consider, because each division has their own review of the process, and we were waiting to hear back on a date to meet with them.
So we would be able to do this under a maintenance permit rather than a,
Not every activity, I don't think so, but the ramp and dredging likely, as in the first conversation with staff, is that that would be a maintenance activity.
okay, good.
Hey Cheryl, maybe since we're on it here, it wasn't clear that where this would pop up, but rather than kind of deferring any further questions you might have on till later on, do you want to, we're here now.
Well, my concern was, and Tom said it too, was to try and get this part of this puzzle moving now, because if it's gonna take us 6 months to get a permit, or, you know, a year to get a permit, not knowing, that we should move forward on this as soon as possible, because I've, by the
It sounds like
time.
they've already done it.
Right,
Yes.
and now well, this is the first I've heard this. So now, we can start to move this part of the project forward, and then by the time we get the rest of it caught up, we could be maybe all at the same time.
I caution you because this is not the only thing that may need a permit. The wetland might need a permit area
right.
as well.
Mhm.
So we're going in with all the improvements in one package to the state and, and discussing with them of what comes out of this committee for what's in and out. We can pull off the table anything that is not being considered further.
Right.
And then we at least know the worst case situation from a permitting standpoint from their perspective. They may issue several permits, and we could have a very easy maintenance permit in hand in 45 days, in theory, and waiting for another general permit for other areas. So we started that process. We're going to hear back from them, and we'll have a meeting likely within the next 30 days.
Okay,
The
thank
biggest
you.
issue we're gonna have is if we dredge, where do we put it?
Yes, that's going to be,
That's a huge issue, we're
Yes.
changing almost hourly.
yeah, as you see out in the backyard. Yep. So boat launch, we were looking at the parking area. Just go to that first. So the current parking stalls, I believe, are 8.5 feet by 17.5 feet or so. They don't meet the current space sizing for the parking area per town standards. What we have shown to date is providing the 9 by 18 stall size within the park area. That is basically just to meet the current town standard. There is a consideration that we could go to the ZBA to ask for a variance, that they would allow the previous size to remain on this park area, and then we would gain more stalls. Currently, we're showing 184 stalls at this site, and that would go up. I don't remember how much you lost, but it may be just.
220.
And I don't believe that we would have 220 left. We're probably about 200 is my guess. Because we lose the stalls along that west beach or the front beach, not the back beach. So, and that loss, we're showing 41 stalls, and that number would change if we were to have a different space size that's grandfathered in by the ZBA.
We have 220 parking areas, stalls now. And we're going down to 184, or we're going less?
Currently,
Now
what's
you
shown
have
now is
net less.
184 stalls.
At the revised size.
At the current
current
town
size.
standards conform size.
Conforming
Yeah.
size.
Yep.
At the conformance.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a possibility of appealing, see if
Yes.
we can remain at the
Yeah.
existing.
And that includes taking out the stalls along the west beach.
The 184 is reduction from along the west beach and
And
even
what
on the
happens
south.
in the south? I know that you said you took part of them, or you took all of them?
On the south side, you can see here the dashed line, that's existing edge of asphalt. We basically reduced one stall from each of these aisles here. We lost 6 right there by shifting this curb lining, because we have to maintain a drive aisle here, and the length of stall has to be the 18 feet. So in order to gain beach here, we had to remove stalls along those aisles.
Okay, so in other words, those dashes I see at the south beach, those are actual stalls? that
Yes,
You're saying you have to
yes,
take some
yes.
out from the center?
Yep,
Okay, got it.
yep. While also looking at the parking area, there has been flooding during a high tide event. We were looking to see how could this be resolved. One suggestion we have is possibly installing inline check valve. Basically what this is if you imagine this is the pipe that's underground, it collects water from the parking area here, and the catch basin goes down to the ground. Normal flow, as in the top picture here, is that water flows out. And the red is the valve itself, but normal flows out, it's not restricted. During a high tide event, we know that the water rises above the invert elevation of this pipe, so this valve then is engaged naturally by the water flow, and actually stops water from backing up, eventually bubbling into the parking area. It's used in a lot of coastal communities. I talked to the DPW staff. They have not used it here in town, but it is a possibility to reduce that backwater flood event that happens in the parking area during a high tide event.
So to simplify what you're saying, Dan, is we have an issue now where at high tide, water's actually coming out of the sewer and into parking.
That's what we've
into the
seen.
parking lot.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a problem that can be corrected. Right?
Out of the storm.
Out of the storm drain, sorry, the storm.
Backwater from the storm
drain, yeah.
Yep. And this is used in many communities to prevent that from happening for this exact purpose.
Is there a maintenance component to having these valves? Because they have them in the Norotan Bay and they don't work.
Maintenance could be that they need to be cleaned out if the sediment's going to back up, and then it keeps it from actually engaging. There's not a lot to it, but that would be if they're not flushed. My thought is that they could be
flushed, right?
Stopped from working. The next item is along Pear Tree Point Road here is adding additional street trees. This is the same graph you've seen before. Looking at a low tree species. There are power lines along the roadway, so we obviously have a height constraint. These trees are from 15 to 25 feet in general. You can see the hawthorn could be 35 feet. But really just providing some sort of vegetation along the road here with a ground species or a shrub species below, either from the Bayberry goldenrod that can handle the conditions along the coast would be recommended. We haven't designed anything, so I can't say how many of each of these there could be, but these are just options for consideration. I see switchgrass provides more of a grass feel along the road, as where a summer sweet has a nice aroma during the summer months. Moving further down along Pear Tree Point Road towards...
Back on that one slide, are these vegetation, for lack of a better word, viable during winter months?
Viable as in...
Are they giving us any protection in the winter months? Because we do get storms during the winter.
Yeah, they would have a root mass that could retain some sand, but that's not really the main purpose for them to be there. It's not, some obstruction of it. Some obstruction would be there, but not significant, I don't imagine.
And in that area, that's really along the road, so we're not designing that nearly as much to buffer against storms as it is supposed to be more of a visual barrier, from the road into the beach parking area, and to provide some sort of aesthetic, colorful appeal with native plantings.
And there is possibility of having these being part of the pollinator species too, that encouraging that along the roadway. But we haven't obviously designed anything further along this corridor.
And the fence will continue from the Picnic Grove area, from that second entranceway that you said you removed,
Yeah.
and then go all the way down to the guard shack.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. No, it's in here.
It's on the parking lot. Right.
Down by the second entrance where the existing picnic area is, we've talked in the past about providing this as a plaza space or a picnic area, enhancing this more. Very conceptually, the idea here is having a space, it could be a mixture of pavers and sand with picnic tables, places for people to eat, basically in the corner here, which would be further designed, but this basically would a space that it could eat under the shade, like it is now with more vegetation, but we'd look at that closer as we get further into the design process.
I have, yes.
Yes?
Yes, we need to look at this a lot closer because this is a huge area that is used almost on a daily basis. And this is pavers that you have in here, but I don't see any grills.
So we have been designing things,
Okay.
so
Well, I just want to get it while it's out here. This area is used, and Pam had given it to us as maybe 35 to 40 picnic rentals during the summer months, which is 3 months. And this area is used very heavily. And the camps are all there. So the camps don't use the grills, but the picnic tables and the area itself. And I think putting pavers in there, I don't know how large this area is, we'll get to that at some point, but I think that some of it is great, but I think sand underneath the picnic tables is a better, and underneath the grills is a better
So
option.
I think it's going to be a balance between the two because we have to provide an accessible route on a
Right.
hard and stable surface. So
Right.
the graphic here is just an idea that we'll have picnic areas. We're going to design it further, but it likely would be a combination to provide that route into the picnic areas for accessibility reasons.
Guilford just did that too,
Yeah,
because
and
a handicap accessible
Can't use
wheelchairs
this,
couldn't
get across the
picnic.
sand.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so that,
so-
they just put a whole nice wood surface there, it's beautiful. And then there's picnic tables along the sand as well,
Yeah.
just gives option.
If I can just make a suggestion, perhaps you should consider where the existing bathhouse is. There's a sand area in front of it that most people do not sit in because it's so close to the bathhouse. That would be a good place to put pavers and picnic tables to make it accessible for the handicapped.
That's great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Cheryl. Love to think about it.
Any more questions for Dan?
Next victim?
Personally,
All
I
right.
prefer the grasses and the plants and no
Okay.
trees on the South Beach.
Okay.
I was thinking the same thing because.
It's a visual,
Well,
yeah.
it's so narrow.
It is, it's
That
true.
you put too many trees there, the whole beach would be shaded.
You mean the West Beach now you're talking about?
What am I saying? Without,
Beach goes-
You said South Beach.
The
I
West
said
Beach.
south, is that the right thing? It's the back beach.
The West, yeah, the back.
South.
Which is the
Yeah, I
one-
said south, sorry, not south, not
Back.
south. I do want trees on the south beach.
You do want to choose in the South Beach.
Yeah, not on the back beach. Sorry.
Some of them here and there, maybe not.
No. It's beautiful, right over.
Okay, this ought to be good.
All right, so, up until now, as you know, we've been exploring a number of different options in very sketchy or conceptual form. And the last two meetings that the committee had with the commission were very important because the commission clarified the elements of the building program for us. So what we've done now is we've come up with 3 different floor plan schemes for the building component of this presentation, of this proposal. And I'd like to go through them with you right now. So, with Scheme A, this is somewhat similar to the scheme that we presented where the elevated portion of the building would hover over the renovated lower structures. So, in this case, we start here. This is first floor, this is second elevated floor. So we would, in this case, we've taken the existing bathroom component and we have actually taken part of it away so that we're spending the money to create better bathrooms. So in each case, you'd come into a little vestibule type area and then you'd go into the women's room or the men's room. In this case, there are sinks on this wall, a wheelchair accessible stall in each side, 2 other toilet compartments in the women's side, 2 urinals on the men's side, and then a storage area in between. This component we're proposing to actually knock down, and because all of the functions in this area are storage, we're proposing to replace it with a new construction that would have to satisfy the FEMA regulations for allowing floodwaters to flow through. What we learned over the last few weeks, one of the things that's in this memo that I presented the other day, was that any structure that is below an elevated structure is considered by FEMA to be an impediment to the flow of floodwaters. And so it either has to then be designed so that it has breakaway walls, or so that it has lattice work or slatted construction so that the waters can just flow through. So this component then, in this component we're adding an elevator as well. So we've provided for the ability for someone to get from the level of the beach or parking lot up to the elevated structure without having to go up 130 feet of ramp. So just as a quick review here, from the parking lot, one would see a stair here and come up the stair to this level, or from the beach could come up to this level, or can walk underneath in here and access the bathrooms, or can walk either underneath or around here and access first aid, lifeguard storage, police storage. And then the first aid and lifeguard storage communicate with each other via a door. In this case, we've also put the elevator in a little vestibule with doors. They do make flood-proof doors that can keep flooding out. That's something that we can explore, certainly. But even if they're not totally flood-proofed, at least they will act to keep most of the water out in most flooding situations. This elevator would be similar to the elevator that the Norotan Yacht Club just put in, where the cab itself, rather than returning to the lowest floor, as would typically happen in an elevator, would return to the highest level, so that in times of flooding, the cab would be up at the second level. Going up to the second level, the elevated platform, one comes up each side. This entire area would be the enclosed heated space. There'd be a series of glass folding doors on each end with one operable door as well, so that in nice weather you can actually open both of these up and have people come up to the concession. The window would be here. So here's the door for access into the concession. Serving window would be here. You could grab some food, go out, sit on the upper deck, or go back down to one of the other eating areas. Elevator would come up and land here, and then here is a smaller unisex bathroom that could function as a bathroom for the flexible community space in situations where the beach maybe is closed, and then you need a bathroom for that space. And then in times when it's not really conducive to keep these doors open, when the weather's not good, you'd close these doors. And then if you're having a function here that needed to use the kitchen for reheating some food or catered functions, this would be accessible to that, though not right in the space. The way that would look on the site is that you can see these are the parking spaces that Dan provided in his latest scheme. And then this would be sort of plaza area. You'd come up to the elevated level, either directly from the parking lot or from the beach, or from this side of the parking lot. And in this scenario also, we've provided an area for tables here, potentially. And then we've kept a couple elevated platforms for viewing and/or dining. So in this case, one would come up a ramp to the first level. Could also come up a stair from the beach. Continue on up to the second level, which is the level of the gazebo. So now at this level, one isn't only constrained to using the gazebo space, but you can spill out to this whole area. And then there are steps that approach that from the beach, so you communicate with the beach that way. There's also a direct path up with steps to the gazebo itself. We have not in this scheme provided for any connection between this upper level and the elevated platform for the building, because it was difficult to achieve it. And in our manner of thinking, you've got the elevator for those people that can't make it up the steps, and the steps are for everyone else. So there really wasn't, in our minds, a very significant reason to connect the gazebo back to that level. Another thing I want to point out is this is mean high water, this line here. The town, this site is located in an R1 zone, and the town zoning regulations require a 40-foot rear yard setback from, in this case, that property line is determined by mean high water. So as you can see, this structure would encroach into that setback, as the existing structure does, and the gazebo is entirely within that setback. So I don't think it's going to be a difficult thing to get approval by the Zoning Board of Appeals, but I have to point out that in this case, we're going to have to get a variance for that. In this particular scenario also, because of the 5-foot rule, that's a Town of Darien regulation, this existing bathroom structure that's being renovated, because it is less than 5 feet from the building that we're proposing above it, we would have to get a variance for this as well, the 5-foot rule. So there are 2 variances required for Scheme A. Any questions on that? Yep.
Yeah, in your note to us, you indicated that any structure built under a new structure would need to have breakaway walls.
Correct.
So does the renovated bathrooms, are you including breakaway walls?
Well, in this case, what we've done is we've located the concession actually at a point where it's not hovering over the renovated bathrooms. By taking away some of the existing bathroom space, essentially what we did is we got rid of the showers, which were not really they're not used very much, and they weren't a big driving force in the program. We got rid of the showers, and we then compressed the building, so that right now it is not being straddled by the proposed new structure. So we're thinking that for that reason, we won't have to provide the breakaway panels.
So in other words, there's no decking over that building?
No. And we're proposing a potential green roof over that.
Okay.
So that from the parking lot, one could see sort of green planted roof.
What is the total square footage, including decking, of the elevated level?
I don't know if I have that figure at the top of my head. I know that the flexible community space is just under 600 square feet, 577. The concession is 275. So now we're up to about 850. Mechanical room is 75, so almost 925. And then there's this, all of this space. I would venture a guess that it's somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200 square feet.
Including the.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So the 575 includes the storage, the bathroom, and the elevated space?
No,
No,
no, that's
it's
just the
just-
flexible
okay.
community space.
Including storage.
And the storage.
Includes the storage, okay, so the 575 starts here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of a stupid question. The green roof, is that the color of the roof, or is it vegetated?
No, it's planted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vegetated.
It's a vegetated roof, yes. And that's just one thought. It doesn't have to be, but just something that we thought might be appropriate, might be interesting.
If you all do decide that's something you're interested in, I've got resources for beachfront, dune-planted green roofs that are really, really cool. So, something to think about.
I'm sure they are, but they had that up at the high school, and it leaked every day, so, since it was built. So, I mean, people in town have that in their back pocket. I'm not, just throwing it out there.
Okay.
On the left-hand drawing, you have the bathrooms downstairs on the first floor, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Here, oops, sorry.
And then these circles are columns that are going to be holding up the second floor?
Correct.
Okay. And how big, so we don't have the square footage of this whole area yet?
No.
Okay, so with a wild guess, how far out from the first aid room to the dotted line do you think that is?
To this line here,
Yes,
I'd say that's about 8 feet, 10 feet.
10 feet?
10 feet.
So we'd have an overhang of 10 feet on one side and a little less on the other side from what I'm looking at.
Correct.
And then you have the staircase going up, and then we have glass doors that are retractable.
Correct.
And we don't know what the size of that room is in there between the elevator and the concession stand.
No, I would say that again is about 10 feet. Yeah.
You're talking about the.
You're talking about
Yeah,
this,
that space,
that
right, with the
dimension. Yeah,
skylight.
that's,
It's
we're
10
showing
by
that at
20,
about 10
10 by
feet.
20, 10 by 25.
Okay. And you said we needed 2 variances. I missed the second one because what do we need a variance for over here?
So the first one is because we would
bathrooms.
propose building within the 40-foot rear yard setback.
Okay. So
And
that would be
I
the-
want to point out that the existing bathhouse and the existing gazebo are both non-conforming. Neither one conforms to that regulation.
Right, but in your message to us, you said that they were grandfathered.
Well, they're there, so.
Well, I would believe that they would be grandfathered since the gazebo's a landmark. And this building's been there since what, 1978 or something? Yeah.
So if the bathhouse was built in 78, it likely it had to receive a variance in order to be constructed. Because zoning regulations go back to the 20s.
Yes, I think we had discussed that before, that there was a variance for that. In here someplace.
I don't recall that.
I thought this was discussed, that there was a variance for that,
I don't know when the gazebo was built. Does anybody know that?
back in the 1800s. No, I'm
You think it's, really?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, those pictures that you
Well,
sent.
not in its current form, you mean. There was a
Well,
structure
no,
up on
no,
the,
no,
yeah,
there
yeah,
was a gazebo there, but I mean,
Yeah.
it has been redone.
Yeah.
Since then, but size-wise and everything from the old pictures, it looks about the same size.
Looks like it's.
Okay,
Did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So moving on to Scheme B. In this scheme, it's essentially a variation on Scheme A where we were trying to move the new structure so that it is 5 feet away from the existing bathroom component. So we renovate the bathroom component the same way we're proposing in Scheme A, but we would have at least 5 feet, a little more than 5 feet between it and the elevated structure. And that would allow us to, or obviate the need for the second variance. So we have a slightly different configuration to the building in this case because we didn't want to just push it back and have it go further into the setback and closer to the water. So in this case, once again, we've got a stair coming in from the parking lot, and there's ample space so that people can get to the bathrooms from the beach and from the parking lot, or from the other beach. Back in here, you've got the same sort of configuration of lifeguard, first aid, police storage, elevator, and elevator vestibule. This is access from the South Beach up, a little less wide than that. I guess it could be wider, but we're thinking that this is maybe the the major staircase and access from the parking lot. Then upstairs, again, this you can see that the bathroom component is now totally detached from the new building. Here one would come up and enter here, this vestibule. We've got the bathroom there, the elevator coming up from below there. This flexible community space with storage closets is slightly smaller than it was in the previous scheme. This would be the concession, and this is mechanical space. So in this scenario, you've got direct access between the flexible community space and the concession. Though we haven't given a big, wide serving window there because we felt that we didn't want the smells from the concession to always be right in your face when you're in the flexible community space.
I
So.
thought on the last slide that it was 577, this says 615.
Oh, this is, oh, I'm sorry, did I get the wrong, I thought, oh yeah, 577, I'm sorry. So this one is slightly larger, my mistake, thank you. And so if one is coming up to get food from the beach, one would come up here, you'd order and get the food there and go back down, or come up like this and around and.
Would that be decking?
So,
around there?
yeah, so this is all decking. We haven't shown tables here as we did in the last game. There'd be tables there. Great views out, really 160 degrees to the south, west, and even to the north from there. And one thing I do want to point out in both this scheme and the other one, we're showing that we could actually have these be big glass doors that fold up so that, this can be really almost outdoor space in nice weather. So that's a potential option. Okay, duly noted.
A lot of maintenance issues can get smashed and damaged. I mean, sliding doors are okay, I think, but
Okay.
folding doors are.
You don't like the overhead? Ones that,
Like a garage?
yeah, sort of like it folds up.
Again, my opinion, though.
Neil.
Rest of them into their deck.
Neil, in mechanical, you made allowances. Would that, so that we can still condition the bathrooms during the off-season?
Oh, the bathrooms. Well, we do have what we call, we allowed some storage space here. So I suppose we could do our, mini splits there.
In these first two schemes, there's a conditioned single bathroom. So if it's off-season and somebody's using the space,
They go down to the restrooms. They go-
I think they're more concerned about the maintenance of the facility
Yeah.
over the winter,
Yeah.
freezing pipes and.
Yeah,
Right.
along that point, then, the bathrooms that are downstairs would be turned off during the
Yeah.
winter session, okay.
That's one scenario, or you could put in some sort of like a mini split that'll heat, with the thermostat turned down low, that'll heat it
Mhm.
throughout the season. That's another option. So the site plan in this Scheme B looks something like this. Once again, here's the bathroom element. Stairs up to this elevated deck, stairs up from this side to the elevated deck, and then all of this component we've shown the same in all three schemes. So just to recap, this one does require the rear yard setback, but does not require relief from the 5-foot rule.
How does that work? I'm a little confused here.
So
It's
you're
two
not
different
renovating
buildings.
Sorry?
Not renovating the second building?
Well, we're not, yeah, we've got more than 5 feet separation between the existing restroom building that we're renovating and the new construction.
So are you saying you don't need a variance on the 40-foot rule here, or you do?
No, you need a variance on the 5-foot separation rule between components of the building.
Right, no, I
But
understand that.
you don't need that, but you do need a rear yard setback.
Right, but on your, your B site plan, do you need any variances?
The 40-foot
Yeah.
setback.
40 foot,
Right
that's what
here.
I thought, that's what I just asked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
But
Yeah,
you
it's
don't
kind
need
of indicated down
you
there.
don't need the 5.
I know that, I asked about the 40 foot.
Yes,
You
you
do
do need
So
a,
in this one too, you need a variance.
every one of them you will, yes.
You know, I remember a meeting early on in this commission, you know, this group, and Jeremy said, you know, we gave a variance at Heath Beach, and we'll never do that again. I don't know if it's
That-
wishful thinking.
No, that was specifically because they gave a variance to allow the level of, the floor level of the bathhouse to be below the FEMA regulation. And the variance was driven by the fact that we designed that building so that the first 42 inches of construction were waterproof. And so at the time, this was before Hurricane Irene, before Hurricane Sandy, and the building committee, as I recall, didn't want to have an elevated building. They wanted to keep it down as close to the beach level as possible. So the strategy was to go in and build it so that it was designed to be waterproof and flood resistant up to the FEMA base flood elevation. And the Zoning Board of Appeals granted that. And I will say that I think the building is held up well in those storms. So it worked there, but now FEMA has gotten a lot stricter because of the two big hurricanes, Irene and Sandy.
But
And
Neil,
so-
you feel that there's a kind of a possibility that the current setback would be grandfathered, I guess is what you're telling us, right?
No, what I'm saying is, I think there's a very good possibility that the Zoning Board of Appeals will grant a similar variance.
I see.
Because it will be similar
of the existing
to what's already been
structures.
granted, yeah.
This footprint's a little bit bigger, isn't it, than, looks like, of the new construction
Let's take a look.
than the other.
The room gets bigger.
You know, I would be very happy to, tomorrow what we'll do is we'll do a polyline and we'll figure out the area, the footprint area for each of the schemes. I'm sorry,
And
I'm not
compare with
prepared
what's
with
there
that
now,
tonight,
too.
but,
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
And these ramps, are these still 30 feet long, these ramps? Going to the gazebo?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, same, there's a ramp there to a lower platform and then another ramp up to this secondary platform.
Mhm.
We did look at a scheme where we didn't have this intermediate platform, we just had a ramp up to a landing and then a ramp up. But it seemed
it just seemed a little bit foreboding to have 60 or 70 feet of continuous ramp with a small landing in between. We can see a situation where someone in a wheelchair or on crutches or just who's having a hard time maneuvering might want to come up to this landing and not go any further.
Right.
And that gives a great vantage point for looking out here and looking out between the two breakwaters to this area, which is a very interesting area, and the tidal wetlands over here. So we think that there's a good reason to have this intermediate landing.
On these landings, this is tables and chairs out there. But when the tables and chairs go in for the winter, is there any kind of bench seating that we can have up there? Because I don't think we're going to leave, are we going to leave furniture out all year long, Pam? You think?
We could do a bench, yeah. In an earlier scheme that I think, presented 2 meetings ago, we did have a built-in bench there.
You had something built in there. I'm just thinking that, if I can't see that we're going to leave all this furniture out all year long. And people do go down there on a nice winter day, and sit there. And if we had something, the table stays inside the gazebo. That stays there all year long.
Well, we're showing tables for a couple of
Right.
reasons here. One is just to give it a sense of scale. So
Right.
you can see when you're looking at it how big this is. That there's room for a table with seating as well as maneuvering around. But it's really up to the committee
tables,
what
be leaving out.
what you want to put there.
Tables and umbrellas, you're going to leave that all year
Not the
long?
umbrellas.
Oh,
but
gosh.
tables, they're made to be left outside.
Okay. Oh, well then that's good.
Yeah, and with coating that is resistant to snow,
Okay.
rain, and rust.
That takes care of that question.
Another
Yes,
question. I
Martha.
like the decking around the gazebo, but again, going back to, are there any deep issues with decking? Does it have to be anchored in a certain way? Does it have to be breakaway? Or have we got permits that are needed for
Yeah,
that?
so in this case, these platforms, we would have them anchored down so they would be floodproof. They're not meant to break
So
away.
they can't
And
break
then
away, so to
these ramps and stairs, the code requires them to be designed to either be breakaway or permanent. So we have a couple options there.
So the ramp stair between coming off the gazebo, in the front, I'll call it the front.
Here?
No, the next
Oh,
one,
this
that
one?
one. Like
Okay.
it's like
That's
an
what's
existing one?
That's existing, yes.
Okay. I'm just wondering if we need that, if we're gonna put the other staircase in and it goes up to the same level as the gazebo. Those stairs there are extremely steep,
Yeah.
and I was wondering if we were gonna keep that, if we could take all those stairs and that ramp out, and then put in a staircase that is more larger stairs, but not
Sure.
as steep.
That's what this is right here.
That's what I figured. So maybe we could get rid of.
I think
the
actually it's a
other
good
one.
idea. That's a good suggestion to get rid of that. Because you've got a gentle way to get up
Right.
there, and then you've got the direct way from the beach to get up there.
Right.
And this platform really does expand the gazebo area.
Right.
We heard some comments from people that, said, well, if someone's occupying the gazebo, they don't feel comfortable going there. And yet they want to be able to come up to this area and really be able to sit and look out to the water. So,
And if this staircase came out farther, and it was like a small step, and then you walk 3 steps, and you go up, and then you walk like a platform type staircase.
tiered, yeah.
I think that would be easier for people on crutches or even on a wheelchair. They could get up that small step. The existing ramp and steps are extremely steep. So maybe we could remove that.
Okay, can I move on? or- Any questions?
Just one question, you know, the mean high tide, the coastal jurisdiction line is 5.5, and I can't superimpose mentally the survey, but I mean, is any of this gonna fall under deep jurisdiction, if the building is covering part of the coastal jurisdiction line?
So this is mean high water, essentially
Right, which is-
elevation 3
Yeah.
and 4, 5.
Yeah,
So this now is cantilevered over that line.
right.
We've included that in our improvements within the entire project,
Because that
so
may- it may
it'll be part of
fall
the
under
conversation.
deep. Okay, so we don't know.
And if we needed to get this little portion right there out of that line, we could certainly tweak the design to accomplish that. All right, so Scheme C looks at it as though, from the standpoint of taking everything down and rebuilding everything. So in this case, and this is, I will say, I think the committee's preference would be to keep the bathrooms at ground level. We understand that. The only reason we explored this at all would be in a situation where FEMA said, we don't want you to do that for some reason, and we had to go up. So we've looked at that scenario, so we're prepared with that in our back pocket, but we're not thinking that we have to go to this extent. So in this case, we would, this case, we wouldn't be able to have the bathrooms at the lower level, so we'd move the bathrooms up here. And we would take the lifeguard, first aid, and police storage, and we'd move that up forward, so it's closer to the parking lot. Put a stair on either side of that. One hugs the building here, the other one does not. And the reason for that is so that when you come up the stair here, you can come back to the bathrooms. So there's women's room, men's room here. And then we also have the same glass doors that we had in the first scheme. So we can come up, those can either be opened or they can be closed, and there'll be an intermediate door that allow us access in. But you can access this space from either side. Again, on a nice day, that could be open, the air can flow through. You go to the concession window here. This is storage for concession. This is mechanical room here. And then across, in similar fashion to the first design, here's your flexible community space. This is a large storage. And then this is the elevator. In this scenario, we're thinking we would not require a separate bathroom here because you could go out and use these. Now that might be short-sighted. Maybe there's a situation where you're still going to want a bathroom that's inside that doesn't require one to go outside. So in that case, then this could go back to being the unisex bathroom, where we could add some closets there, similar to what we had in the first scheme here. And the way that looks on the site, in this case, because we would not be constrained to having any of the existing building below, we actually have rotated the building slightly so that it's parallel with the parking lot. And then also parallel with this. It gives us a little more room to get back in. Somebody who wants to come back and maybe explore the breakwater, they can do that. This all remains the same as in the prior two schemes. In this case, once again, we need a rear yard setback. We do not need the variance for the separation, 5-foot separation. So,
Neil,
Yeah.
if you, on the scheme C here, if you had that bathroom by the elevator that you had in the other schemes,
yeah,
and that were a unisex ADA,
yes.
Do the other 2 bathrooms also have to be ADA?
Do they?
Yes, in the event that one's used to it.
Yeah, and if you have access blocked off to the shared space, but the beach is open, as a vacuum, somebody's.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know,
okay.
oh yeah, that's a good point, that's
Yeah,
right.
okay.
If the flexible community space is locked up, so we've tried to provide, with all of these designs, the ability to have the flexible community space locked up, but still have access to a concession.
Right.
Or to have the whole thing locked up, but still have access to the deck. Yeah, I don't know whether we need, okay, yeah, well, we'll check that. I know you have to provide handicap access, wheelchair access to at least one restroom. We'll check that and get back to you. In every scenario, the elevator's available, so one can get up and then get access either to these, or if that's unisex, to that.
If it's too early to give a swag at the price for 18 sleep. You know, we get this name, we don't get that in B, just to
Yeah.
put a number somewhere in the cloud or whatever you want to call it, but.
I would not want to give you that number tonight.
No, I'm not asking for
Yeah,
tonight.
I can, I think we can give it some thought and have it for the next meeting, yes?
To me, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
The configuration, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it works.
Yeah, I do.
No changing rooms for the children?
Well,
Breakaway on the first floor.
yeah,
Maybe
so
a couple scenarios.
that is something that we
As
did.
you're taking out those showers, that's where the kids are changing. You walk in those doors, there's little benches there, the kids are in there with their parents changing into their bathing suits.
All right, so that is something we had in our initial scheme. We took it out in order to, compress this area so that we weren't underneath. But we could add it back and have it be with the breakaway construction. So that in a flood, it would go away, and then you still have that.
I think you really need to add it back. I just want to say, I don't even want to go to Weed Beach anymore. You built the largest bathhouse known to man, and it's appalling to have to change in there.
I think we get it.
Okay.
Yeah, we get it.
Please do.
We get it.
You know, we still haven't resolved the issue of police storage, which I think is questionable, the need. I
We
mean, that
have
could
to
be
nail them down on that.
something.
In
that
terms
could
of
be-
how big it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to nail them
It's
down.
true need to have it over there.
Yeah, so we show it in all of the schemes, but.
Right. And if we were to take it out and not have it in this whole, in any of these plans, that would make that area available for something else.
Or make it smaller.
Or make it smaller.
Or make it
Or make
smaller.
the whole building
Yeah.
smaller. Well,
Yeah.
that's another, but in A, the size of this building where the lifeguards are, is that the existing building now? This, right, is that the existing size now?
Roughly, but it's
Yeah.
new.
We're showing
Yeah,
it
so
as
we're
being
gonna take
new.
that
That's
down.
roughly, yeah.
We're gonna take, in all these plans, what's there now is coming out.
Yes.
This component, yes.
Okay. And the bathrooms.
That will allow us to
No.
spend the
The
money we
bathrooms.
need to
The
on
bathroom building, the
renovation.
bathroom building stays.
And it gets
As a
modified.
reduced size, yeah.
He just said he's gonna, he'll go
Right,
back, he'll go
okay.
back and show us where the original
Right.
print would be, so you can see the difference.
Yeah,
And add in changing facilities, right?
yes.
Excuse me.
So the thought here again was that
Sorry.
we only have a certain
Oh, no,
amount
I'm
of money
sorry.
to renovate
I wasn't sure what you
this
were saying.
component. We want, it's important to us that we have the bathrooms at grade.
Yes.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
really need to focus on spending the available funds on that.
Mhm.
So in this case, we would tear this component down. And if we built something new there, as long as it's all storage and not habitable space, and as long as we design it to be either breakaway walls or unobstructive, not obstructing the flow of water, we can build it new. So,
Is the footprint 1,000 square feet? Is the footprint 1,000 square feet? Is that what you're talking about?
I think it's a little larger than that. Yeah.
Yeah, hey guys, look,
Perhaps.
I'm trying to be respectful, but we're really trying to focus here, and we'll publish all this information. We'll provide additional measurements so everybody will understand what the size of each of these is, and we're past the public comment period now. I mean, we're here, it's a long meeting, and we've got to finish what we're here for.
I think perhaps at next meeting, it might be helpful to have a slide that shows the existing building footprint, and then schemes A, B, and C.
Yeah, I think in all of the other iterations where you showed the kind of the line of the existing footprint, it's very helpful, and I think we need to kind of have that back in.
I also think we need a 3D drawing, a CAD picture.
Yeah, he hasn't got that.
Because
Well,
it's very, a flat scheme here.
So
to get
that's
the floor plan.
what we were, proposing to do for our next meeting, which is September 11th. We would come with what it looks like in 3 dimensions.
So could we talk about next steps for a moment, and then we could certainly come back and talk about, any other questions? I'm sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
I just wanted, okay. On these drawings on the second floor, are you still considering something like this that we had before with a flat roof to make it so it's not as tall?
We've been looking
High?
at 2 schemes. One of them has a flat roof, and the other one has pitched roofs.
Okay.
So it look a little bit more traditional, a little bit, more like a coastal architecture. So one is flat roof and a little bit more contemporary or modern looking,
Mhm.
and the other one tries to be a little bit more traditional looking. But that second one is going to have a taller impact.
So originally, you had indicated that the peak would be about 4 feet above the existing
Correct.
dorm, or peak of the existing building. Now with the 5-foot rule, how much more will that be going up, another 4 feet or
No,
so?
no, no, no. No, the 5-foot rule, we positioned this so that in this scheme, we would get a variance from the 5-foot rule, so we wouldn't have to go up.
Or you're trying for a variance from the 5-foot, and so you only go up, what, a
And-
foot between the,
Approximately, yeah. And we've spoken with Jeremy about that, so we know that's one viable avenue. The 5-foot rule actually was determined by the zoning board, to the best of my knowledge, based on a horizontal or bird's eye view of building components. And it's to avoid a situation where you've got, let's say, a house, and then an accessory detached structure, which doesn't have to abide by the full setbacks, and then someone comes in and links the two, and now the accessory structure becomes non-conforming because it's closer to the property line than the setback for the main house allows. So that's really the derivation of that rule. I have never heard of that rule being used in a vertical situation. So we just happen to fall into that, that situation where the 5-foot rule pertains to everything. And I don't think it was meant for a situation like this.
and just so I can understand it then, so you got the variance for the 5-foot, so would this storage area have like its own roof, and then there would be decking or a deck and building 1 foot above it?
Well, the new area, this new component could go right up to the deck. Doesn't have to be separate.
Or you might make it as, okay,
You
might
could.
make it a budding, or like
Yeah.
a second floor in essence would be the elevated level, so this would be the first floor.
Correct. So
It would be
this
separate.
component could touch the structure
Okay.
above. as long as it does not impede the flow of floodwaters.
And another question, at one point you had talked about a skin around the building.
That was an early design
Okay,
concept that I don't think.
All right,
is-
so in other words, we'd see piers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was an early idea that we were thinking of disguising the existing
Okay.
buildings. We've learned a lot more now and have realized that we don't need to do that in this scheme.
Cheryl?
I don't know, I have to concentrate on all of this.
Okay.
I do want to have the measurements. If you could send those out to Pam, Pam can send them to us, we can write them on the,
So maybe, would you prefer if we don't wait 2 weeks till next meeting, but if we prepare that drawing tomorrow and
That'd be
send
fantastic.
PDF
Yes.
to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
that'd be great,
Thank
because
you.
it's difficult to say, well, it's 10 feet,
Yeah.
and this is 5 feet, or this could be 11 feet. You know, it's easier to, you know, then I can go down with my measuring tape and measure it.
Okay.
So maybe what we'll do is give you some overall dimensions on each of these, so we can see the overall width and length, and then some floor areas.
And a comparison to the
And
existing
comparison to
structural
the
footprints.
existing.
Maybe just put a little scale in the bottom right-hand corner or something, so somebody can pick off something.
Adele? Yeah?
Yeah, I'm good,
Sir?
I think that's great progress, Neil.
Thank you.
Tom?
I'm good.
Okay. Martha? Okay. So Neil, can we talk about, and Dan, can we talk about next steps? So you'll get revisions out with some metrics on it.
Right, so that'll be the
24
first
foot.
thing. And then our push over the next couple of weeks is going to be, what does it look like? And I don't know, I guess we can
Our
talk
next
about this.
meeting's on the 11th.
Next meeting's on the 11th. Right.
So can we expect that you'll come with elevations for each of these?
Well, that's a question I have for you. Do we really need to do elevations on all three? Or should we?
Personally, I would leave out the third.
Yeah.
I would leave out C.
I would agree with you on that.
Mr. Secretary, can we make a note of that? Yeah, because it sounds to me that you're proposing C in the event that we're not successful.
I
with
think
A or
C
B.
is a fallback
Yeah,
position.
so then I would just say,
Well,
certainly A and B, if that could work for you. I guess what I'm thinking is, I don't know if we're in a position where we can make a decision on
A or
one or
B.
the other at this point without seeing the elevations. I think they're very interesting. I think they're really good. For different reasons, but. So,
I have a question on B. Pam, on B, where the concession stand is connected to the flexible space. They said that they could go from the other side to get into the concession stand. Would the flexible space then be closed up for 3 months in the summertime? When we were looking at
No,
having this.
the idea is for the residents to be able to use the room and the space during the summer.
Right.
with no events.
Right. No events.
Programs.
No events.
Right. So that, I don't really, well, I shouldn't say don't like, but I think the concession stand should be by itself. I can see people coming up this way, going through the flexible space, and
You already said he was gonna take out that doorway and this, going into the flexible.
But Cheryl, one disadvantage,
on the left-hand side, Tom, I'm talking about the doorway by the staircase on the left. That stays.
Which scheme?
I'm in B.
Okay. So you come up to the,
Come up on the left-hand side.
yep,
And then there's a doorway at the top of the staircase.
Correct.
Okay, so you go in through there, then you go into the concession stand. So you're going through the flexible space into the concession stand.
well, the concession stand in this design is not meant for customers to enter.
It's got a window.
There's an outdoor window on the north deck
On the
there.
north side.
Okay, so that door then would be closed off.
So
Well, then-
when the flexible community space was not in use, that would be locked up. And people would come up to the concession from the deck, from outdoors. But there's an interior door that communicates with the flexible community space for those times when you want to use, the kitchen.
Could we flop the mechanical space with the concession space? So when you walk up the ramp, it's the first thing you hit is the concession stand?
Yeah.
And then the same thing, otherwise you're walking around.
Actually, you're right.
Yeah.
Here's the window.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the window. I thought that was up here. Never mind.
Yeah,
Well, that's from the right side
Right.
staircase, right, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah.
Going straight up that way.
So then you make a
Which
decision to walk
is-
around and go inside if you want, or you're on the outside decking.
right.
So you have a decision. When you purchase something, you either walk around to go inside, or you can stay on the outside on the deck.
Mhm.
Whereas scheme A has it with the space with the skylight in there, and you come up the 2 steps.
Right, you have
Both
vestibule.
sides, you're right
You have
there.
vestibule in between the
Right,
concession
and you're
and
right
the-
there.
and the space.
Right.
Right, and you're basically right there. You
I
don't
think
have to.
I think you're pretty much the same walking distance. It's just a
No, I think it's a
configuration.
little farther, but that's not my point. My point is that then the flexible space is over on the other side where it's kind of left. And if somebody wants to go and use it and instead of sitting outside at the tables and chairs, then they take their food. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. I think,
I prefer scheme A because at the times when you're not using the flexible community space, you can have access to the concession
Right.
while the community space is locked up. And also, in nice days, you can open up those walls on both sides and it's almost like the concession stand is outdoors.
Yeah.
So I
well,
think
the
it,
skylight, now what kind of a roofing are you considering to put a skylight in over there?
That's next week's problem.
Well, I know, I just thought I'd ask. Throw it in.
what would you like, Cheryl?
I don't know, I don't know. I have to think about, I have to go down to the beach and look at this again.
Okay.
I know you're a fan of green roofs, so that
Oh, yeah.
skylight and a green roof.
And the solar panels?
Oh,
Solar
I'll go there.
Solar panels are, well, it would be a self-sustaining building.
Yeah.
Okay, so so you'll get us an update of this with metrics.
Correct.
Next meeting, we can expect elevations of A and B.
Correct.
With the goal towards, if I'm understanding correctly, you'd like, with your goal of us settling on one of the 2
Well,
at that stage?
looking forward in terms of the process, if we want to go to the zoning board of appeals soon, let's say October, then the deadline, I believe, for the October meeting is September 18th. So when we meet next, it would be helpful, if we want to move the process along, for the committee to make a decision as to whether you want to go ahead with A or B.
Yes,
Because that will determine which variances we go for.
got it.
The other thing would be to consider whether or not we want to go for a variance to the parking size regulations. Though I am in thinking about it, I think the existing parking space is 8.5 feet wide. So you're saving 6 inches per parking space.
So a foot for every 2 spots.
Foot for every 2 spots. I don't know, what's the length of?
18 spots in a row, there's no more.
18 spots in a row gives you 1 more parking space, so, but times 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah, times how many?
yeah.
Yeah,
How many
for every
rows?
row, right, so.
Yeah,
It's
so that-
meaningful.
It,
It's meaningful.
it might be meaningful. I'd like to know that before we,
Right. and I
because we
think-
may have bigger fish
I
to
think,
fry.
Dan, yeah, exactly, and I think, Dan, maybe if you can help us with that, and maybe
Sure.
just kind of do a shot of it with kind of the
That's what
existing.
we have today.
Right.
8.5
Yes.
feet.
8.5 feet,
Yeah.
so were you still parking there?
And the regulation now is 9. Dan's plan was shown with the proper
With the
parking space
Yeah.
dimensions.
conforming.
I think, you know, the less we can impact the number of parking spots, the better.
Agreed. So, all right, so that would be our third variance then in October.
And Dan, you'll have some schemes showing just the vegetation along the,
Ken?
and as opposed to, and maybe keeping, you know, let's keep the beach, the increased area of the beach that you got sketched in there.
Yep.
So I guess the question would be, what do you want from Dan and his crew next?
Well, so it does sound like, so just to kind of reiterate what Randy was just saying, so and maybe an update to current scheme that you've given us. It shows South and West Beach without berms, but with an extended beach. And then, you know, to whatever extent you think you might want to represent something. I think at this stage, probably just the concept that there'll be plantings there.
Okay.
Anything else from Dan?
Did you, have you talked to DPW about actually where those storm drains go?
Yeah.
That's in the beach, does that actually go to the storm drain that runs down Pear Tree Point Road?
Yep.
It does, it
Yeah.
doesn't go back into the south?
No, we traced it. It comes basically towards Pear Tree and then parallel to the boat ramp,
Okay.
discharges.
So that one that's at the West Beach is what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that runs into the storm drain
The-
along Pear Tree and then runs down toward
Yeah,
the...
for a short length. Yeah.
It goes back
Sure.
into the sound? Into
And
the
then-
back?
Directly discharges into the bay. Yeah.
But the discharge into the sound is over by the boat ramp along that
Yeah.
bulkhead over there? Or-
From mapping we have, yes.
oh, okay.
And I did get information from Jim Flynn that they remove sand out of the parking lot 3 to 4 times per week. Usually only by shovel, but maybe once every 2 weeks they need the tractor.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
3 to 4 times a week?
3 or 4 times a week?
Because of the tides.
They're there very early.
Well, you can tell when they're there because you can see the sand left in there.
You know, one question I have,
Okay.
may I, one question I have pertaining to that is just the consideration, I know we're talking about curbs at the edge of the beach, but maybe to facilitate getting sand back on the beach, maybe better not to have a curb. I mean, that curb really, when you think about it, isn't doing anything in terms of preventing anything from coming, the curb isn't really serving a purpose.
Right.
Or people driving onto the beach.
True.
Right.
It does serve that, and maybe there's another kind of mechanism you can use to tell people, don't drive.
I do think that that's a safety concern, because somebody could accelerate.
Right, but you could theoretically have a kind of maybe a steel rail of some type that's, you know.
But
that
we don't
just-
have the curb today on the South Beach. There's no curb. To my knowledge, is
I
there?
think there is a curb, yeah.
There is.
Never mind.
And I'm just thinking, you know, for Jim's folks, I mean, to get, just another step to get sand up off the thing and up. It may be easier for them to get it onto.
Does having the curb give you something when you're pushing the sand to like make it fill your shovel up so you can lift it up over?
Probably,
I
yeah.
think we need the curbs.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Well, that's why I asked about the sidewalk. If the sidewalk could be raised up a little bit, if we put a sidewalk in, could it be raised up a little
That
bit?
would be integral, so it would likely be a curb as part of the sidewalk. But you're saying raised on the beach side, so you have beach elevation and a little higher would be the elevation
Right.
of the sidewalk.
Right.
You could have that. And then drop down to a curb into the paving area.
As long as it didn't take, I'm very concerned about the amount of parking spaces we have.
I don't think you can have a 3-foot wide sidewalk.
No.
I think it's gonna be like 5 foot. If you have a 3-foot wide sidewalk and you pull your car up, the nose of the car is gonna be 3/4 of the way over the sidewalk.
Plus, you also have to, you just brought up a point, is you have to watch the height of the curb for smaller, lower riding cars.
6 inches is a typical curb height.
Yeah.
We do have smaller curbs heights. We have different profiles of curbs, but I would recommend a traditional curb in
6 inches.
for the purpose of preventing vehicles from entering the beach itself. It does allow that push against of cleaning up.
That's a good point.
one more thing to think about with the sidewalks is, and maybe we need to think about this during design, is how are they removing the sand right now? And would there need to be specific locations where they dump the sand back onto the beach if there's a sidewalk, right? So that they're not throwing it over a 5-foot sidewalk.
I'll have a good talk with them.
Mhm.
Or otherwise, we take sand that's in the sidewalk, in the parking lot, and take it someplace else and not put it back on the beach. Because it's got dirt and contaminants in it.
Let's just concentrate on keeping the sand on the beach.
Well, I know, but I mean, if we get all nice new sand, and then it goes into the sidewalk, and then we're putting, I mean, we're doing the same thing we're doing today.
It's gonna go into the parking lot,
It is.
so.
The drain over by
deal
the
with
bathhouse, did you look at that drain also?
The storm drain?
Yes.
Not recently, I had in the past, but I would.
Okay, because that's just a hole in the ground. That doesn't connect to anything.
It's a dry well, probably.
Yep.
Okay.
Just fills with sand. Okay.
All right. You all set?
Good? Everybody's good for the moment?
I guess.
Neil, you have everything you need from us?
I think so, guys, everything? Okay.
Great, okay, so then with that, I guess the next item is,
New
yeah.
business?
Is it we,
Any new business?
okay,
We could take care of that.
would you like to invite a motion to get out of here?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
So moved.
All in favor?
Great.